For the most part, you don't want to get into a toxic comparison game and think, oh my gosh, he made this much, I only made this much. And I think the best way to think about it is it's really a journey on your own, and it's a competition with yourself to be. Risk management is paramount to longevity. Okay, I have a super strong thesis, but it may not be time right. It may not be time right now. The fallacy I kind of had in my head is like the biggest traders, like they never take losses, they're always right. And so for whatever reason in my head, let's say stocks, went from 1 to 2 and it breaks out to 230 or 250. I'm thinking in my head, like, well, they obviously, they're not down, but it's like, if it's making new highs, everybody's down.
Hello, and welcome to the Trader's Journey for Investors Underground. In this episode, it's an honor to be joined by Brice Foose of 7 Points Capital. Brice's journey is an extraordinary one, forged by transformation, determination, and resilience. From overcoming incredible odds at an early age, to finding a career as a pharmacist, and eventually becoming a consistently profitable trader at one of the top prop firms in the country, Brice serves as an inspiration for all traders who are determined to succeed. In this episode, we'll discuss how Brice developed his edge, refined his process, and built a long-term equity curve. Hello, Brice. Thanks for being here, and welcome to the show.
Hey, how you doing, Anthony?
Doing well. I'm glad we get to chat like this. I remember watching your presentation at Traders for a Cause and telling myself, oh my gosh, I have to ask if he'll come onto the show and record so the audience could get to hear his trading journey as well. It's spectacular.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
I'd love to go back, if we could, to the start of your life, because I think it's one of the more profound and incredible things about you. Could you talk a little bit about your upbringing? Because I think it might be a little bit different than what the average person goes through.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm a childhood cancer survivor. So when I was 2 years old, I had a Wilms tumor in my kidney, so as a St. Jude patient, they basically took out one of my kidneys, and then I did chemo for 6 months. And then after that, I was, basically just checkups every 6 months or so until 10 years were met, and then, everything was good. So today I live with one kidney, which I've done for basically 35 years, and no real issues, fortunately. But yeah, it's definitely something I went through as a young child, that definitely kind of influenced in terms of, some of my resilience and some of my personality today, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's definitely one of the questions that I had, which is like, how much do you remember at that age? And, is it something that you look back on and reflect about, I could get through this, whatever it is in your life, academics, career, and think back to all that you've already, fought through.
To be honest, I don't think about it too much. I was so young too. It's like, it's not like I'm really doing the fighting. I mean, I had, the support system in terms of family helping me, and then obviously the doctors and nurses and oncologists and stuff that basically, basically saved my life. So, but it's definitely, I can definitely think about it and think, I survived that. So I'm definitely put on this earth to do something, and make my days worthwhile, right? Because, definitely tomorrow's not guaranteed and something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And did that experience at all sort of influence you in your decision to, study and become a pharmacist? Where did the pharmacist interest come from?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely played a big role in terms of me kind of wanting to be a healthcare professional and almost give back in that way, in terms of healthcare professional kind of saved my life. So I kind of felt it was definitely a duty for me to kind of get into some sort of healthcare profession, and then basically to give back in that way. But yes.
And so while some eventual traders might have been studying, to become, either business administration or maybe even finance, you became, and started a career as a pharmacist. So how did the trading enter the picture? What was all of that like?
Yeah, so I guess in high school I kind of went back and forth in terms of what I was going to do and study and stuff. So originally I wanted to do something with finance, but I mean I had no idea about stocks or any of that stuff. I mean I was aware of a little bit I guess, but I really didn't know much about it. And towards my senior year, I decided to actually change my major, which was finance, to basically pre-pharmacy and kind of go that way. Um, and so basically just got into pharmacy. And then it wasn't until basically my second year in pharmacy school, and I had a guy, and we did a lot of group projects, and he was into the markets. And he was into biotechs, and so it kind of really resonated with me in terms of, we have all this pharmacy knowledge and stuff that we're learning, and then here's these companies that are, you know, a lot of times, you think about the ticker, but a lot of these companies are the real companies doing something, whether or not they do it correctly or it works. Um, and so that was something I kind of really resonated with, and then kind of the two combined in terms of my interest of finance as an early, basically back in high school, and then now the pharmacy to where maybe I can combine both, and that's how I kind of started in terms of me looking at different biotechs and thinking of different ways I can do things using that pharmacy knowledge, and then the passion for trading kind of grew and grew from there as I started to discover more strategies and just different things in the market and different things you can do.
What were some of the resources that you used, in addition to your colleague, your peer, that helped you learn about the markets? Or was it hands-on from day one, or were you also reading books or anything like that to learn?
Yeah, so I mean, I definitely interacted with him quite a bit at first because I would be like, "What's going on? Like, where's the market down?" He's like, "Oh, news in Russia," and I was like, "What? I have no idea about any of this stuff." But I would let's see, I would read like a lot of seeking alpha articles, looking for different companies, and then yeah, I found Twitter, and Twitter, a lot of different financial stuff on there, and different traders and things. And that was, I think I joined Twitter kind of late 2011, I believe. And I came across a site, BioRunup.com, who's, Mark, really good guy. And so that kind of really got me a solid footing in terms of not only the biotechs and stuff, but how they trade and why they trade the way they do. So I was a subscriber there basically until they shut down. I believe in maybe 2020, 2019, something like that. Um, but I was there at least 8 years or so, and so they would do webinars and weekly videos, and I would watch most of them. And I actually remember like I would take the webinars and I would have a whole notebook of tickers, different catalysts, and I would kind of just jot down different ideas, and that's how I kind of just built this database in my head of all this pattern recognition stuff in terms of that sort of strategy, and in ways different biotechs can react to certain types of news before and after, and those are patterns in normal markets that continue to play out. Now we just had this massive sell-off, one of the worst in the last century, actually. So a little bit of it's abnormal right now, but in normal markets, a lot of those patterns play out over and over again, and sometimes it really depends on the time frame. And there's a lot of different variables that go into it. And I continue to find different nuances, whether it's a mistake I make or something I miss, or something else that pops up that you kind of just continue to adjust and refine strategies, basically.
What was your strategy at the start of your trading journey, and how has it evolved over the years to kind of what you look at now and the types of stocks or plays that you might have these days and the trades you'll take? How has that evolved over time?
Yeah, so at the beginning, I was just basically a buy and hold swing trader. The first one I bought was a company, Mankind, and they made inhalable insulin. And so in pharmacy school, I actually had a class, and the 1 week we were basically supposed to live like a diabetic, so we had to do these injections, and of just normal saline and actually, do the glucose testing and stuff like that. And, the needle stuff is not fun. So my thinking was, well, gosh, I mean, inhalable insulin would be awesome. So, what an investment. But obviously, there's way more that goes into that in terms of commercialization of the drug and, whether or not it's going to actually be profitable. Um, and so that was kind of my first one. I held that for a few months, and then I kind of came across BioRunup, and I'm looking at all these other biotechs, and I was an intern at CVS at the time, so I'd pick up extra shifts, and pretty soon I'd come to Scottrade and deposit a little more money because I had another biotech I wanted to buy for another swing trade. And so that's kind of how I got started. And I did that for. I still do that strategy here and there. It's not my main source of my main business, I guess, but it's definitely something that I still see a ton of potential with in the correct markets. Um, and so yeah, I did that, for a couple years, and then I graduated in 2013, and then in 2014, as the income started to get more and more, I was able to kind of branch out to different strategies, and kind of grow from there.
If you're looking to take your trading to the next level, Investors Underground might be able to help. You'll have access to courses and mentors to learn from, some of the best technology available for scanning stocks and breaking news, and access to the chat rooms, where you'll find a vibrant community of focused traders who share their trade ideas in real time each day. Members have access to the morning broadcasts, where the IU moderators share their trade ideas for the day ahead during the pre-market session. Members have access to the midday study sessions with Stan, midweek study sessions with Sam, webinars, moderator watch lists, trade recaps, and all the other resources that Investors Underground has to offer. Listeners of the Trader's Journey can access exclusive membership deals available at investorsunderground.com/journey. And now, back to our episode with Brice Foose. What was the first sort of strategy that you found to be helpful, profitable, that really resonated with you and your trading and your personality?
Yeah, I can remember there was a stock, Arena Pharmaceuticals, RARNA, I believe was a ticker. Right? I'm pretty sure they got bought out years and years later, but anyway, they had a weight loss drug, and so I had bought the stock at 2, and I held it through their advisor committee meeting, and I held it through FDA approval, and I sold at 11. And it wasn't a ton of money at the time, but you're thinking 2 to 11. And so my thinking was, if I can use this pharmacy knowledge and kind of predict different FDA events or clinical trial results, stuff like that, I could really, really do well. The reality of that situation is there's different variables that no matter how smart you are going to come up, and you may put in, let's say, 200 hours in one trade and trying to predict the results. Let's say, for example, it's FDA decision and everything checks out, but maybe at the manufacturing site there's something that's wrong and they don't pass, and so they get a what's known as a CRL, and all that work, now the stock's down 90%, right? So quickly I learned that holding through catalysts is a totally different situation. Now there are definitely hedge funds that employ 20, 30 PhDs, and they're able to do that at a very high level, but is that 100% win rate? Absolutely not. There's still stuff they miss, things that come out. Biotech in general is hard in terms of a company getting a drug all the way through trials, getting it approved, and then finally marketing it for a decent profit is a very, very tough business.
What does your routine look like today? From pre-market to the time you're done for the day. What does that type of routine look like?
Yeah, so I'd say I'm Central Time Zone, so market opens at 8:30 here. I'm usually checking things at 7. I've done the 4 a.m. stuff from here and there, but for me, I mean, it makes for some long weeks. When I think about, I mean, I really want to be trading for a long, long time. I really don't anticipate shutting it down by any means. In terms of retiring or something like that. But when I think about longevity, do I really want to sit here from 4 a.m. to 5 p.m.? I think burnout not that I'm worried about burnout, but the burnout potential is way higher probability if I'm doing that, every day, Monday through Friday. So anyway, so I check quotes about 7 a.m., so 8 Eastern. Use on my phone, I'm checking Twitter, news, overnight positions, swings, stuff like that, that I think need to be monitored in the pre-market. Some of them, the big picture, they're not doing much in pre-market for the most part, unless there's news. And then sometimes, to be honest, it's not even really actionable. Like if I'm going to hold one for 6-8 months, I don't think there's anything to do at that point in time. But anyway, then I come down to the desk about probably an hour before open, 45, 50 minutes maybe. I check IU scanner actually, and see what's going on, what's moving, why is it moving. Typically the night before, I kind of already go through some of the things in terms of things that popped up in after, stuff like that. So I'm already a little bit aware, and I trade long enough to where there's definitely tickers pop up in terms of newer IPOs and stuff. Obviously, I don't have any idea about, but for the most part, usually there's a few tickers that'll maybe be in play that I've definitely traded before. I totally understand what they do, kind of and patterns consistently kind of play out for the same players, even though there's a ton of them. And so, yeah, so then I'm basically getting ready in terms of locates, in different trade plans. I usually put on starters and pre-market just to have a little bit on. For me, it kind of, I can feel better if I have a little bit on, even if it's, let's say, 10% position. And then a lot of times I'm kind of scaling in the first 10 minutes or so to different positions that I want to be in. Say it's a stock that's up quite a bit, and I think it probably shouldn't be. So yeah, so then I pretty active the first half hour or so in terms of entering positions, and intraday I'm setting hard stops. And then continue to monitoring scanners and see what else is moving, and what might actually be actionable throughout maybe some intraday plays that pop up, and definitely different news flows and things like that, which IE does a good job of putting out. That's pretty timely, I believe. Yeah, so then I basically get through the trading day, and then after the market closes, I'm usually here for probably another hour or so, just to look at after our news, the findings and stuff that come out. Lately, since the weather's been a little bit better, we're out of winter and stuff here, that I'll usually try to hit a walk if it's nice out and try to get some sunlight, and then come back and I'll take a screenshot of all my executions. And I put them in a kind of a private Discord, more for organizational purposes. And so I'll have every intraday trade, and I'll do a summary. Sometimes a large paragraph, sometimes it's a couple lines. But I want to talk about a little bit of a thesis, why I'm in this trade for the most part, and then different characteristics or variables that I think were important. Absolutely stop placement, where was my stop at? And then different things that I can do better, basically, or did well. And sometimes there's not a whole lot to say, and then sometimes I do have a lot of thoughts. So, that can probably take me 20, 30 minutes or so, sometimes a little bit less. But, and after that, I usually, a lot of times I'll hit the gym, and then come back and dinner with the kids and stuff like that. And then kids rest the night basically until they go to bed, and then usually before I go to bed, I come back and I pull up all those executions and I compare them with kind of the Thinkorswim chart without any executions, and that's kind of my review process. I really want to I try to focus on doing the visual review basically right before I go to bed, just because I think that basically the way learning happens in the mind in terms of those interneuronal pathways, when they're formed, like the fresher it is in your mind right before you go to bed, the better chance you have to kind of really form it into learning. It's kind of what I practice in pharmacy school, and kind of the same thing I do in trading. But yeah, that's basically a summary of the that's the grind right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. And I appreciate it. I think it's always cool to hear how a trader, especially a consistently profitable trader, approaches the day, approaches trading, and in your case, even approaches continuing to learn. I think that's a really interesting way that you've organized your day to continue to learn and keep things fresh.
Absolutely.
And the type of plays and trades that you take, are there tend to be, more bearish shorting? Is it, more of the small caps? What type of trades do you find yourself taking more often than not?
Yeah, so mainly small caps. I'd say most of it's on the short side. Um, Intraday longing is something that I will do when certain criteria are met, I would say. As consistent patterns kind of continue to play out, or sometimes I think the news is just so good where a lot of times I would probably short it, but this is the totally different scenario to where the type of news and the company is actually super undervalued. So sometimes there's a thesis that plays out like that where, maybe switch it up a little bit. Um, but yeah, so mainly small caps, I would say, but definitely, I'd say since 2022, maybe before that, but definitely always been looking to kind of expand the playbook. So I've definitely added some large cap strategies in certain situations. Now, I'm not one to trade large caps every day and get chopped up by any means, but some people may have edges scalping those, kind of in different ranges and stuff. But for me, I'm really looking. I mean, I do well when things kind of trend throughout the day. So, for example, the small cap, if it fades, most of the day or the majority of it, that's when I kind of do well. Um, but yeah, I'm definitely always looking for new edges and looking to expand the playbook as I grow as a trader.
I've heard you mention before, for you, price action is king, and for those who don't know what that means or how you think about that and use that in your trading, what does it mean to you?
Let's say I have a super strong thesis. Let's say it's a biotech up on XYZ news. I know exactly what the news means. I followed the company for maybe a decade at this point. So I'm super confident in my thesis and how it should play out. Let's say, for example, I don't think the news is that good, so I think the stocks are short. But for whatever reasons, it's just way too strong. So bids are holding; they continue to step up. Uh, it's making higher highs, continuing to break resistance. It's above VWAP, things like that, to where it's like, okay, I have a super strong thesis, but it may not be time right. It may not be time right now. So that's the situation where it's like, regardless of my thesis, the price isn't acting the way it should. And so I kind of had to learn that the hard way because, definitely with pharmacy background, like I can have a super strong thesis that it may be completely correct, but it may be some fund or something disagrees, and whether they're right or wrong in the long term, like the stock's gonna go higher, right? So that's a situation to where like I definitely want to see the price act right, um, get some confirmation, and I think I do a good job of adding to a winner and kind of cranking the stop down. And so the ones that really work can pay pretty well.
I know you mentioned VWAP, volume weighted average price. I'm wondering, are there any other technical indicators that you might have on your charts or that you think are helpful or that you pay attention to help you get in or out of a trade?
Yeah, I keep it super simple. I on my infinite charts, all that I have is view app and volume. I use the 1 minute because I'm a extreme. I want to pay extreme attention to detail, so I want to see I want to see all the candles. I want to see how they react. That's just kind of the way it's kind of been programmed in my brain. So that's what I want to see. And then on the daily chart, I just have the 50-day and the 200-day to kind of see a bigger picture, kind of where the stock's at, in terms of looking at like basically the 6 month, and then sometimes I'll look at the 3 year. Um, But for the most part, I mean, I don't have a ton of indicators. I mean, intraday VWAP for me is the main thing, and then price and volume. For the most part, I keep it super simple.
How much attention do you pay to, say, macro news, and where that fits into the type of stocks that you trade?
For the most part, I think in normal markets, not much. But coming off this April sell-off, it's quite a bit different because especially moving forward, like coming up this week, is you're going to have different plays that say they're up. It's going to look like they're up a ton because their gap percentage is 50%. But if you look at the daily chart, they're back to where they were a couple days ago. So it's like, were they really extended? So it's just because they're up, let's say 50 or 70%. We actually had a good example just happened this week, and ICCT was up from 24 cents and went to 766 on Friday, I believe was the high. Um, but if you look at the daily, like the first 2 days, it's basically back to where it was in the last month. And there's a reason why it was down at 24 cents potentially. But was that part of the plan? Could have been too, because people see it the first day and they think, oh my God, it's up so much. But if you look at the daily chart, is it really that extended? So that's something to where you take macro into consideration, especially with biotech. Biotech's been absolutely, the sector has been decimated. It's been a hated sector for basically 4 years. At the peak of 2021 was absolutely euphoria. I don't know if it'll ever get back to those 160 highs or whatever this XPI was at that time was totally insane. It went parabolic, but it's another scenario where it's like biotech may be up this week, let's say 40-50%, but if you look at the daily chart, it's back to where it was a couple days ago. And did anything change in the company to cause that decrease in price? I mean, a lot of it's debatable, but a lot of it's just panic selling and people just forced to exit at this point. So, it's not something to say in terms of managed risk. That's the only reason why it's down that much, especially if you're long. But it's something to think about in terms of framing your trades and looking at the big picture where things are at and why.
Yeah, absolutely. And on that subject of risk management, what's your general perspective on risk management, and how cognizant are you of putting on risk, managing risk throughout your trading on any given day in any given trade?
Yeah, so risk management's paramount to being to being able to survive. Um, Intraday short, I'm definitely definitely want to have hard stops in every position because I may have, gosh, on a busy day I might have 7, 10 open positions at the same time. I mean, I can't manually manage each one, so I have stops in for each one, at a price where it's kind of paired with the dollar amount I'm really willing to lose. And for the most part, I mentally accept that loss. Not that I go into the trade thinking I'm going to lose, but I understand if this doesn't work out, this is roughly how much I'm going to lose, roughly, because slippage is kind of just part of the game at this point. And then so it's all kind of broken down in terms of like a daily max loss for me. And I don't want to lose, for the most part, I would say half of a daily max loss on one ticker per se. I mean, there's definitely situations that override it, and a lot of it depends on kind of how the day's going. But a lot of it's broken down in terms of based on that max loss dollar amount, and then each trade is kind of, it can be definitely varied in terms of the risk I'll put on it. Some I'll definitely think different variables kind of play into whether I think this could be a really good trade, and that might be kind of one I'm willing to risk a little bit more. And others, it may be not a great setup, but I'm still going to take it, and I'll use, a little bit less risk. But I also think there's a lot of different ways to manage risk. I mean, you can do it by position sizing. Let's say the floats, I mean, we had AERB on Friday go completely nuts. Floats 120 or 420K, or it was before they did the private placement. But something like that, I'm gonna definitely trade smaller than something that say the floats 200 million shares, right? So, um, So I think position sizing is big. Stop placement, different things that have bigger ranges. In pre-market, I'm going to have probably a wider stop just because the range is so much, to kind of give myself the best chance of giving it room and letting it work. But yeah, that's kind of a breakdown of kind of how I manage risk intraday for sure.
How do you think about, possibly re-engaging in a trade versus the times where you decide, it's better to just live to fight another day and don't re-enter into a position? How do you think about that scenario on any given day?
Yeah, that can be a little tricky. I think for the most part, I give myself 3 attempts. Now, just because I lose once, for the most part, I don't want to get back in. There's sometimes I will start back in right when my stop hits possibly smaller size and say, okay, well, it stopped me out this time. I'm going to scale back in. And then when it's ready, I'll add the rest, right? Or maybe I just it needs a little bit more room. So I'm a little early. I took a little loss the first time, but the second time I'll be able to hopefully time it right and really add on confirmation when it's ready. Um, the times in terms of live to fight another day, I really think about my max loss days, and I actually just had one on Tuesday, which was they're it's never a great situation at your max loss, but I'm a big believer of it's there to protect you. That's the way I view it in terms of the intraday max loss. I definitely hit it probably, I'd say, on average, probably every month or two. Lately, it hasn't been too much, but there has been some days I've been down in the morning and then able to time it right, kind of when it's ready, and end up having a good day. But like Tuesday, for example, was one where I hit it and I did re-engage, and it still didn't work. But those are opportunities I thought were really good, and they didn't work. And so, unfortunately, it went a little over. But realistically, I can still make it back in a good day or two. And so that's, I think, key in terms of living to fight another day. Like, I don't really want to lose enough to, it takes me 1 to 2 months in terms of like an intraday trade to make back. So that's kind of how it's structured. In terms of when to reengage versus when to kind of call it quits, I mean, that Tuesday, I mean, I had already lost a little over my max loss, and things were just not acting right in terms of, if I'm short, like this is continue to go crazy, in the afternoon, and I've already lost, a couple of times. It's like, all right, like I'm definitely wrong. I've already been wrong. And so I'll definitely, those are days where it's like, all right, I'll wait till tomorrow or just wait till it's ready. And it's important for me not to lose an absolute ton on a single day in terms of intraday trading. And so that's when you kind of make the decision to where that's like, all right, I've lost enough today. We'll get them tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah. And, whether it's a big loss, max loss, outsized loss, losses are not fun. And, we're just coming off of back to back very, very red days in the market on tariff news and reciprocal tariff news. So how do you mentally reset after a big loss, something outsized? What that process I know could be different for different people. How do you reset and think about getting back to sort of a equilibrium points the next day or the next couple days or week so that you can get back to trading in the pocket?
Yeah, I'm usually pretty quick to reset. Thankfully, some losses are tougher than others, and it kind of depends on why the loss happened and kind of different variables in that in terms of being able to reset. The tariff stuff is a lot of that for me is just kind of long term things or longer term swings that obviously are not working when the market tanks the one of the worst in the last century in terms of percentage drops quickly. So that can be a little tough on that end. But a lot of that depends on time frame and position sizing, things like that. Um, but yeah, in terms of intraday, I mean, I think back to actually my worst, probably my definitely my worst single ticker prop loss, which I showed in my trades for cost speech, was ZJYL, and that was one where it was a China name, and it had kind of halted around down and up in the morning, and then all of a sudden they halted it at 11 a.m. Eastern, and it didn't open. It halted around, I believe it was 22, and then they left it halted the whole day, and it opened up in pre-market or in after hours. They left it halted the whole day and went to 500, and there was no real chance to get out. And so that was, my definitely my biggest single trade in terms of prop losses. So in terms of resetting, it wasn't really a normal process trade, and it was something that had never been seen before in terms of, there have definitely been ones that went crazy, but they give you a chance to get out. That one, like if you're stuck in a halt, you're not going to be able to get out. So that was a painful one. That was a nightmare of a day because you're sitting at a halt and it quoted 750 for an hour flash. I mean, some of them will flash and it'll be, just kind of a glitch, right? And then it'll come back down and be fine. And none of them really actually, really go up there, or stay halted for the most part. They actually did two after, or two, with the last, probably in the last 6 months or so, there's been two others. But, for me, basically it wasn't really a normal process trade. So while it sucked that I lost that much, it's like, I'll make it back. It's going to take some time. But then the other part about it is like, I'm definitely, after that in a drawdown, but I don't want it to continue to cost me too much in terms of like, if a really good setup comes up the next day or the next week, just because I lost that, does it need to continue to cost me? So that's part of my mindset. But then obviously, there's the part of like, you don't want to dig too deep of a hole, too. So it's a kind of a fine line. But usually I'm able to navigate it, and it comes with experience. And I think the long-term equity curve kind of plays a big role in terms of if you zoom out and see where you are and what you've done. If you got a process that works and you got a equity curve that continues to trend up with minimal drawdown, and even if I look at that, I mean, it's a kind of a blip on the radar, even though it was my max drawdown then. So yeah, you take away lessons from each loss and move forward, and everything gets better with time. I think I'm a big believer of that. And for me, if I can, even if it's a small green day, then boom, you kind of maybe you slowly grind it back, or maybe it only takes you a couple days. At that time, I was actually kind of going back to it. I was actually kind of lucky. If I can draw positive from it, I was lucky in the time frame because I don't have very many. Thankfully, I don't have very many red months for prop. I've went a total of almost 3 years at different times of not having a red month and being green every month. But that was a time where November was a red month for me. It was actually not terrible, but it was actually my worst red month, and it was basically because I was kind of break even coming into the last week, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna make this count, and there was a few tough ones, and it didn't work out at all. And then luckily December 1st, from December 1st to like December, basically up until ZJYL, I went on a pretty good run, and so I made that back, and then quite a bit more through those, I believe it was 12 trading days, and then that ZJYL took those 12 trading days. So mentally it's like, well, it was basically just 12 days it gave back, which technically if the max loss, it was 6x my max loss at that time. So if you're thinking 2x your green day, then the math checks out. Not that it has to be, mathematically correct all the time, but with that one though, I continued to trade. I mean, that would happen on a Monday, and I continued to trade. I'm not really wanting to take days off, regardless of what happens, but I continued to trade, and it was actually a rough week because I had a couple others that didn't work out that week. So the week was pretty bad. But I think it maybe take me like five weeks at that time to kind of grind it back, and a lot of it was trading a little bit smaller. Definitely the confidence was a little bit shook, but a couple green days here and there, and then pretty quick you're out of it, and then kind of back to business as normal. So it just takes time.
Yeah, and I like that you mentioned that you find a way to take a positive note out of something, even like a max loss, multiples even.
Yeah.
How important is it to keep that level head and find solutions? What do you attribute some of that ability to? Is it having a good support system? Is it having a great pod of people that you can talk to about the trade? Like in those moments, how do you find the silver lining?
I mean, a support system helps, but to be honest, it's a lot of it's on your own. Um, you can definitely talk to different traders and stuff about it, but I don't really think there's really any hand holding that can help too much. I mean, it definitely helps a little bit, but for the most part, you really got to kind of reflect on your own, and then somehow draw positive from it, in a negative experience like that, and then kind of go from there. But yeah, I mean, a support system helps, but the best thing to do is kind of really look into it, find solutions in terms of the easy solution for me. Well, I don't want to say easy because I don't really like say easy with trading for anything because trading is extremely hard. But one of the things for me to do is definitely look at solutions to implement. And so, after that, it's like when certain criteria are met with something similar to that, it's like I don't want to be involved. Um, Basically, because I mean, in that situation, you couldn't manage risk at all. I mean, I even had I mean, in my head, I mean, the plan was if it halted up and let's say it opened up 100%, like that was kind of how I gauged my risk, even though it sounds completely crazy. But there were a few that did halt up 100%, but nothing had been halted the whole day and then went to 500 right out of the gate in after hours. So that was, definitely an outlier, something we hadn't seen, but I feel like regardless of how long you trade, there's always different things that pop up, and it's like that's never happened before. But it's like there's things that continue to happen that's never been seen before. So, and that goes with kind of always recreating and refining rules, making new ones, and that's kind of part of the game for sure.
Absolutely. And I was just about to ask, how do you control for outliers? Like are there certain policies you put in place afterwards? Do you have new policies now, that you use and implement so that you don't have to go through that again? What does that look like for you?
You definitely want to have kind of a worst case scenario in mind when you're managing risk, but when you're talking outliers, it's like things can get bad in a hurry. So I think you really want to look at different variables of the trade and think of, not to say that you want to be worried about worst case scenarios, but you want to be cognizant about, if XYZ happens, like, and I know this has happened, like, let's say, for example, if it's something similar to ZJYL that pops up, let's say it's some China IPO that's a million afloat and is doing tiny volume and it looks like it might liquidate, but you never really know what these guys are going to do, obviously, at this point. So is that something I really want to go big size or even trade at this point? No. So that's definitely looking at outlier situations and then kind of going from there. Another one, I guess, when you're talking about outliers is we had TNON in September that this massive went from 3 to 130 in pre-market, and I had a small position swung for that one, but at the time it was I've definitely had float restrictions on certain swings. And there was so many that nothing really happened over the years, right? But obviously 450K float, something can definitely go bad in a hurry, especially in pre-market when certain players want to get out and there's no liquidity at 4 a.m. or if somebody else wants to push it, they can do whatever they want to do. So that was a situation, another outlier to where it's like, all right, well, I definitely need to get back to a float restriction in terms of, anything swung, or maybe even really think hard about swinging, overall in that situation at all. So that's another one where you look at variables and then think of, what could potentially happen and how to protect yourself.
One other topic I wanted to touch on, which is sort of related to this, and talking about reviews and outliers and risk, is trading at a prop firm, because you're able to see a lot of different trades from a lot of different traders, how they might have traded something that you traded as well, but traded it in a different way. And so, what has that process been like for you? Getting to learn from others, and obviously teach other and mentor other traders in the prop firm. What has that been like for you? What's the growth process been like for you? And for those who are interested in learning more about prop firms, like, are there certain personalities or scenarios that might be better fits, for prop traders versus retail traders?
Yeah, in terms of prop fit, I would say basically traders that are profitable, looking to scale up profitable strategies is kind of the main driver for prop for the most part. Um, in terms of surrounded by other traders, you're definitely you're surrounded by or have access to guys that are definitely doing it for a living. That are honest about their situation for the most part. And in prop, like it's eat what you kill, so there's really no sugarcoating. Hiding big losses and stuff like that that sometimes can go on in the community. Um, but it definitely helps a lot, I think, in terms of growing, and then in terms of me as a mentor, that's helped quite a bit in terms of I'm a big believer, like if you can if you can teach it, it kind of makes you better and kind of more accountable. So that helps in terms of mentoring and stuff like that. But then the other part of mentoring is you definitely have guy. I mean, I have a few guys under me, and now we kind of work together on different trades. So, work together on different theses, or different ways to structure trades and things like that. So, it's been really beneficial to see them grow, and then now they're able to add pretty good value as well. So we kind of work as a team. So that's very helpful.
What type of personalities do you think, or characteristics of great traders, have you noticed? Are there certain, types of people that do extremely well, whereas others might not have these types of characteristics and tend to struggle with trading?
When I look at a personality and think, would they be good for trading? I think there's a lot that goes into that. Number one, you got to have a passion for trading and be, for the most part, self-sufficient. Like you can definitely, take advice and things like that, but for the most part, like a lot of the work and stuff has to be done on your own, because it's like nobody's going to hit the buttons for you. So you need to be self-sufficient and do it on your own, but then also be able to receive kind of feedback. I wouldn't, maybe criticism here and there, but for the most part, feedback, and then be able to implement it. So being able to not only receive it, but be able to put it in practice quickly. Um, so ones that aren't able to receive kind of criticism, or even feedback, kind of just brush it off and keep doing the same thing that doesn't work. That's not a great fit, but and then I think disciplined person, to where that definitely helps a lot. Attention to detail is a really good personality trait, I think, for trading. But yeah, I think that's there's a lot that goes into it, and everybody's a little bit different. So it's really tough to. It's you can kind of think that one guy may be super good for trading, and then a year later he's gone for whatever reason, and then there may be others that it's tough to judge the personality, but they do incredible. So it really depends on the person, and there's so much that go into it, and you're not going to really find any two guys that trade the exact same way. So that's kind of one of the things that makes the market great, and that's why the stocks move the way they do. So
I can imagine there's sometimes, comparisons between, someone traded the same stock you did. Maybe they did better. Maybe someone else, sees that you did better, and it takes away some of their joy because they didn't get to do so well as you did. So how do you think people are able to compare or see the success of others without it being detrimental, right? And we also see this online as well. There's a lot of people posting huge P&Ls, and maybe that gets into the head of other traders who see that, and they're kicking themselves, or not even celebrating their own wins because they're too worried about comparison. How do you put that all in a way that makes sense without being able to really be detrimental in how you think about yourself and your wins?
Yeah, the comparison game can be tough, and I think it's different for everybody. I know, some traders that, they'll mute or block anybody that does that kind of P&L highlighting that's, especially if they're, obviously, most are not showing the bad days, which are happening, here and there, depending on how they manage risk, if they do that at all. Certain situations like that. But I think the best thing to do is it's really a competition with yourself. So when somebody does something really good, there might be something to take away from that. I mean, I still, I definitely look at different charts and stuff on Twitter and think, well, damn, like that entry there, and the exit here actually looks, something maybe I can implement. I still do that today. Not to think that I'm, trying to trade, change a bunch of things that I do, but I think it's good to keep an open mind and see how different things are done. But for the most part, you don't want to get into a toxic comparison game and think, oh my gosh, he made this much, I only made this much. And I think the best way to think about it is it's really a journey on your own, and it's a competition with yourself to be, the best trader that you can be. There's always going to be somebody that makes more. And you got guys on Twitter, but there's guys out there that make way, 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 way more, right? And they're not public because they don't care. They don't, it's a waste of time to probably even get on the app. It's on the levels that are out there. So, it's kind of, it's not really something to pay too close attention to, I guess, in terms of the Twitter and the, some of the highlight reel stuff. But I guess to summarize, it's really just, I think the focus should be competition with yourself, trying to get a little better each day. You can view some things here and there and see what this guy did and his approach, and maybe that's something that you could implement, or maybe ask a question about here and there. But
Brice, I know that you've been at Traders for a Cause on, several occasions over the years. Has Traders for a Cause played a role in your trading at all? And if so, how?
yeah, so I started going the very first year in 2014, and I was there every year except for 2021. I missed. I had a college roommate that got married. I was in the wedding, so I had to miss. It was the same weekend, but had to miss 2021, which was unfortunate because that would have been a really fun year to be there. But yeah, I've been every year. It's played a massive role in terms of developing a network, meeting different people, in person as opposed to just seeing them on Twitter or a couple DMs or here and there. Has been massive in terms of kind of expanding my network and getting better as a trader in terms of surrounding myself with people that can add value and kind of be in the trenches together for the most part. So it's been huge for me. I really, I kind of said this in my speech, but I don't really think I'd be here in terms of trading where I'm at without the event. I met Mike Katz there from 7 Points in 2018, and that's kind of how I joined 7 Points after kind of talking with him throughout the weekend here and there. So that was huge in terms of expanding, developing relationships and things like that. I will also say in terms of trading after Trades for Cause in definitely my early years, some of my worst weeks were right after. Reasons being, I mean, I would just be so pumped up from the weekend that just, obviously you're pretty much, most people that go there are super passionate about trading. That's why they're there. They want to be there. And so you talk markets all weekend with them, which isn't really something that you're able to do in your normal life with, people. For the most part, but you're so excited to trade come Monday, and you're thinking about being the biggest, best trader you can be, and so you oversize things, and after being in Vegas for a weekend, so your sleep's probably not been the greatest. And so I definitely had some of my worst weeks right after Traders for a Cause. The other thing is you're talking about different ideas and different strategies throughout the weekend, and if your strategy isn't set, which my process is pretty set now after years and years of doing it, but in my earlier years, I would kind of second guess and be like, well, this guy, he does this and he does this. And so I'd kind of be so confused coming back that, my process would be kind of so messed up and just, pretty chaotic, which typically is not the way it should be. Um, but yeah, so that's something that, it's obviously, hugely beneficial, but I think it's another thing to be aware of in terms of, I'm sure I'm probably not the only one that has a tough week after that. Whether you're just kind of overconfident or maybe I remember 2014, Mikhail Shadkin was there, and, his message was, you need to be a trading monster, and his speech is still on YouTube today, I believe. But I was so pumped up from that speech. I came back that week, and I was going to be the trading monster that week, and unfortunately, I sized way too big on certain setups, and I had a pretty bad week after that. So that's just something to be aware of. That's for me. I mean, basically, my process is set now, so it's much easier to come back and just kind of stay in the flow of things what I normally do. But I think if you're a newer trader, something to be aware of for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll echo that. I remember, I think my second year of Traders for a Cause, I was so pumped going into that week before I left for the conference that I took a big rip on Shopify. I think trying to short it way too early and just being one of the worst trades of that year for me because I was just so hyped to be there. So definitely something for people who go to meetups, Traders for a Cause and whatnot, is maybe take some time and reflect. And another question I had on that topic as well, Brice, is do you think people need to be profitable traders, monster traders, to show up at Traders for a Cause or other meetups?
No, absolutely not. Like I said in my speech, I mean, I was unprofitable from 2014 to 2016, and when I say that, it's not like I'm losing money every day. I actually was pretty consistent, but the issue would be I'd have one loss here and there. I'd lose way too much, and so to where the end of the year, like you can't say you're profitable if you're right on the year, even though I mean, realistically, you can have a really good year, but let's say December 31st, you take a massive loss, it wipes out your whole year, and actually you're unprofitable for that year, right? Even though you had a phenomenal year, the other 251 days, but it's that one day that takes, the whole thing. So I think when I said that, people are like, oh my God, you're unprofitable for 3 years. It's like, yeah, but when you think about, 90% of traders lose money, it's like, everybody on Twitter is not the 10%, or I would even argue, less than 10%, especially when you're thinking about longevity in terms of, 15, 20, 30 years of being profitable year after year. Um, but yeah, I mean, I came there as unprofitable, and I kept coming back every year, and so I definitely don't think being profitable is a requirement to be there. You're there to learn really and network, and so you can throw the P&L or lack thereof out the window and be there and really grow regardless of what level you're at.
Brice, I'd love to be able to wrap up this episode with a sort of lightning round session. Quick questions, pretty quick answers. Is that okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. The first question that I have is there one thing that you're working on now to improve your trading?
I'm always looking to get better. So whether it's entries, exits, both, sizing, looking for different strategies, everything. So, I don't think I've ever had a perfect trade. I've had a lot of good ones throughout the years, but there's always something you can do better. Whether it be sizing, for the most part. I mean, definitely, you can get to levels where there's liquidity restraints and stuff like that. But for the most part, there's usually something that can be improved upon. So I'm always looking to improve, and that's kind of the main thing that I'm doing in my reviews is saying, this is kind of what I did, and this is kind of the way the stock played out. But is there certain things that I could have done better here? And I think over the years, doing it every night, you can really kind of develop something special. But it takes a lot of time, and really, you really got to love it to be able to sit here, at night every night and kind of look at those charts over and over again. So,
What's the best piece of trading advice you ever received, heard, or read?
just to keep it simple, on the bad days, I know Katz has told me before, if I, definitely kind of in my prop career when I've gotten, had some tough days, it's like, hey, it's only one day. It's one day, right? So, you come back the next day and then continue to grind it out. But, that day, as bad as it was, it's only one day. And, we get tomorrow and we get next week and next month. And, as long as the losses aren't too big, and the drawdowns are controlled, we just kind of keep going. So
What would you consider to be your greatest strength as a trader?
I'd probably say two. I'd say my memory. So just memory for different scenarios, pattern recognition, charts, tickers, companies. I feel like I have this just massive database in my head. Over the years, I think there's so much in that database. Sometimes it can get a little cluttered in there, I guess. But let's say you trade 5 tickers a day. For a year, it's 252 trading days. That's a lot of tickers. Obviously, some you're trading multiple times, but over a decade, that's a lot, right? So, but yeah, I would say memory, and then I'd say another one's patience. Patience, basically for holding positions and holding winners. And sometimes that comes back to bite me in terms of I'm too patient. But in terms of the goals I have for myself, I think the way to really achieve different levels is to get bigger wins, and for me that's more patient holds and kind of getting the meat of the move or the entire move if I can. So
If you could go back to your first couple years trading, to the early days, and give yourself one piece of trading advice, what do you think it would be? And do you think you would have listened to it?
risk management is paramount to longevity. I don't think I would have listened because I really needed to figure out for myself. But when I first started in my first few years, or maybe even first 5 or 6, I think I had this kind of fallacy, and a lot of it's created by kind of Twitter and a lot of the kind of the nonsense that goes on there. But the fallacy I kind of had in my head is like the biggest traders, like they never take losses, they're always right. And so for whatever reason in my head, let's say stocks went from 1 to 2 and it breaks out to 230 or 250, I'm thinking in my head like, well, they obviously they're not down. But it's like, if it's making new highs, everybody's down, right? There's no sugarcoating. Like, it doesn't matter how good a trader you are, like if it's making new highs, everybody's down. For some reason in my head, I just had like all these really, really good traders I looked up to. They're just always right. So in my head, it made it tougher for me to manage risk. To where I kind of had this mindset was like, well, you shouldn't be taking a loss because all these good traders never take losses, which is completely flawed opinion. And I think really the only key to longevity is to focus on risk management. But on the flip side, you really got to experience it for yourself, and kind of go through some situations to where if you do have poor risk management, then you're going to have some experiences that they hurt, and when it hurts, the pain's deep enough, and that's when you change, and that's what happened to me, and that's unfortunately that's what people need to probably happen to them, and that's the way it goes.
What would you tell anybody listening who's having a hard time, having a big drawdown, and questioning whether or not they're able to trade, whether this is right for them? Maybe they're considering quitting. In general, what would you tell them? What advice would you give them?
I think if you have a passion for trading, you're gonna always keep coming back, no matter how much you get knocked down. That's kind of the way I am. Um, but I think everything gets better with time. We got this massive sell-off right now. I think if you have any sort of long swing strategy, there's no sugarcoating. Like it's atrocious right now, right? So, um, some of it's live to fight another day. If you have to, or whatever your approach may be, but it definitely can make you kind of have some self-doubt and things like that. But the advice would be, it's a long road. I mean, we have this sell-off right here, but 25, 30 years down the road, what's this going to look like in terms of, how you've performed in the market for, another 20, 25, 30 years down the road, right? This probably be a blip on the radar, even though it seems like the worst thing that, has ever happened. Um, but and unfortunately, as the wins grow, so do the losses at times. As capital grows and stuff, and stuff like this happens, the drawdowns, the numbers can get a little bit bigger than we want them to. But yeah, I think zoom out. And I wanted to say this in my speech, but I kind of didn't have enough time. But I think about to this Bill Ackman interview that I watched. Lance actually had posted. So I think it's 3 hours long actually. But there's this one 10-minute clip that he talks about his loss in Valiant, and the fund lost $4 billion, which I think was back in 2012 maybe. I mean, absolutely devastating, right? So, and he was going through a divorce at the time, and just, I mean, we don't talk about shit hit the fan, right? So, but he talks about, what you do is you look to make a little progress every day, and so, you know, you come in, you make a little progress that day. 30 days later, you made 30 days of progress. You look back and like, okay, we're getting somewhere. 90 days later, okay, well that's, it's way down there. 3, 4 years later, it's like that's gone, right? So it's wouldn't say it's a blip on the radar, $4 billion loss, but and not to say you have to lose $4 billion to make it meaningful. I mean, the dollars are relative, to each person in terms of what's significant to them. But I think the key is, in terms of like one of these big softs, if you're having difficulties, which anybody with a long swing strategy definitely is, especially if that's the main part of your trading business. It's going to take some time, but progress compounds, and eventually at some point this will look like a blip on the radar, even though it seems super bad right now. But if you think about a long-term view, 5, 10, 20 years down the road, what could you do if you continue to improve every day and make a little progress? Then you'll get through it. And I think another part of that, in terms of if you're going through a situation where you're questioning, I think balance comes into play. So it's like, trading is what you do, but it doesn't like define you, right? So those, the drawdown, if you're going through one right now, or if you had in the past, like it shouldn't define you. You should have other interests and other things going on in your life, and if you can make progress in other areas of your life, let's say it's at the gym, or a different hobby, or with your family, your kids, something like that. I mean, definitely for me, Simon asked me that, are you fulfilled in trading? And I was kind of caught off guard. I didn't really think too much about it, but to kind of circle back to that, I think, trading's, it's a huge passion of mine, but it's kind of one part of my life. Like, to be truly fulfilled, I think you need balance, really good balance. So, I'm a husband, I'm a father, all those things are really important to me. I have hobbies, different things I make progress in my own life in terms of different hobbies and things like that. So I think that comes into play when you're going through tough times, and kind of putting it all in perspective. It's like trading is what I do, but it doesn't define me, in terms of the person I am, which can be difficult. There's no sugarcoating. It can be tough, especially during tough times. But I think it's necessary to kind of zoom out, and kind of have good balance, and then just understand that things are gonna be better with time.
Last question. For those listening who would like to learn more about you or possibly even contact you, how can they do so?
Yeah, I'd say on Twitter, I'm not active on there at all. I'm mainly a Twitter observer, but I do have a few interviews I've kind of reposted on there, and then my DMs are definitely open. Definitely no buy sell. Don't ask me, do you buy the stock or whatever. I can Number one, I'm registered, so I can't answer anything like that. But no dumb questions, please. But if it's a thoughtful question, I think good traders definitely understand and can recognize thoughtful questions right off the bat. So I'm definitely more receptive to that. But yeah.
And I absolutely recommend everybody go watch Brice's Traders for a Cause presentation. We will leave a link to Project Impact in the description section of this episode. Brice, thank you so much for being here. It's a pleasure getting to talk to you and getting to listen to you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anthony. That was fun.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Trader's Journey. We have additional episodes we believe you might also like, so don't forget to subscribe. You'll be notified of upcoming releases the moment they're available. Thanks for tuning in.